People, even before this, were suffering from depression and anxiety before the shelter in
Yeah.
place was given to us. Has this made it worse?
I think that is a good assumption to make. I think for some people who maybe had low levels of anxiety before and were functioning quite well, that it's highly possible for them it's gotten a little worse. I actually had a conversation with someone this past week who um, fairly regularly experiences panic attacks, which for those of you who have never experienced one, it's overwhelming. You feel like you have trouble breathing, it feels like you might be having a heart attack, you're weak and shaky, you're not sure if you're going to pass out, you don't know how long it's going to last. Her comment to me was, as we discussed anxiety and COVID-19, is that now that everyone is in this kind of worst case scenario, she actually feels better. She has less anxiety because she knows she's not the only one going through it. And I thought, what a fantastic perspective to have, in that even when you feel disconnected and cut off from people because of the shelter at home, this attitude of we're all in this together is actually a comfort. And there was once a time in my life where God kind of gave me that realization too, in that when I was struggling with something I didn't have the answer to, and it seemed to be going on a long time, and it was very discouraging. He just impressed upon me, the world has been in existence for thousands and thousands of years. You are not the first person to have this problem. You won't be the last person to have this problem. There is an answer out there somewhere. You just have to be patient. And that was the hard part, being patient with the timing. But trusting that the answer was out there did bring a lot of comfort.
So that's very interesting, Machelle, because now that person said that now they're not as anxious as they were before because we're kind of all on the same playing field. What does that say about then the knowledge that you are not alone when this is not happening?
Right. What would it take to, I agree with you, what would it take to achieve that perspective once this is done? And maybe that will be really kind of the epiphany of our society, in that, hey, even when COVID-19 has finished, we are still all in this life together. And though your struggles may look different than my struggles, we both have struggles, and we can both empathize with that and understand what that brings to our lives and the complexity that brings. And maybe it will help us to open up and have more of that community mindset that we were lacking before.
Yeah. Would it be safe to say then, I know what you're feeling because I went through that in the COVID-19 season that we had? Or would that still be too insensitive to compare that?
I don't think, hopefully it would never be perceived as insensitive.
Okay.
But I think that we underestimate people's intuition, that when you say, I understand, but you don't really understand, you just feel like it's the right thing to say, they know you don't understand.
Right.
But there are times when, even if they don't know everything you've been through, you can say, I understand, with such genuineness and sincerity, and come from a place of knowing that it just shows in your face, and they know you get it.
Yeah.
And there's really not much else that needs to be said,
Right.
I once heard that there was an expression in Japanese, I don't know what the expression is, but translated into English is, I'm sorry that happened to you and not to me. Like a full expression of, I'm sorry that it happened to you at all.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's hard for me to find joy in something that didn't, when you experience a suffering that I didn't have to experience.
Okay.
Right. That's the kind of the impression that I got from it. And I felt like that expression was very profound. But I want to go back for a minute to the example of the friend that I was talking to last week about the anxiety. Because in so much as she found comfort in this mindset of we're all in this together and I'm not the only one going through this alone, she also recognized that there were very specific things that she knew about herself that helped to give her comfort when she was having a moment of anxiety. So she shared with me that for her, warm water, so taking a hot bath or even washing her hands running her hands under warm water was so soothing to her that it was a good distraction for her to practice that when she was having a moment of anxiety, and allowed the warm water to soothe her and calm her. And so we talked a little bit about some other very concrete things. And if this is a good spot, I'd like to go ahead and share some of those other concrete things that people can do when they are personally having a moment of anxiety. So one of the important things that you mentioned earlier about my interest in nutrition is the role that vitamins and hormones and minerals play in our emotional well-being. Magnesium is a really important element to our bodies that helps to calm the nervous system. So taking a magnesium supplement is recommended, but doing something that feels good, like an Epsom salt bath, your body will absorb the magnesium from the Epsom salt through your skin. It will help you sleep better. It will help relax your muscles and help relax your nervous system. If you don't have access to a bathtub, you can soak your feet while you're watching TV in the evening in warm water and Epsom salt, and that's very effective as well. Also, I want to mention about the importance of magnesium is that magnesium is the precursor to DHEA, which is kind of the foundation for the majority of our hormones being manufactured by our body. So that's another important thing, in that having enough magnesium in our diet, either through skin absorption, like I mentioned, or through supplementation, is essential to having balanced hormones, which can also play an important role in feeling emotional well-being. In discussing hormones, another really valuable hormone to keep in balance is vitamin D. I know we refer to it as a vitamin, but it's actually a hormone. And just a little bit of exposure to UV light can help our skin to start producing the vitamin D that our body needs. And oftentimes in the Northern Hemisphere, I grew up in Michigan, and in Michigan in the wintertime, you went to school in Michigan for a while. You actually grew up in Detroit. Didn't you remember those long, dreary winters where it was just overcast day after day, basically from the end of Thanksgiving almost through to the middle of March? And so it's expected that when there's a lot of cloud cover, you're not getting enough UV light. It's very beneficial if you don't have access to UV light in the wintertime. You can suffer from seasonal affective disorder, which is depression that comes in the wintertime only. That's usually a strong indication that you're not having enough vitamin D in your diet or being produced in your body. You can get on Amazon, you can buy a little Happy Light. I bought one last year for $40, and it just sits on top of my kitchen table, and I sit in front of it while I have my morning beverage and do my Bible study. I turn it on about 6:30 in the morning in just 15 minutes. It's just fantastic. It won't burn, it won't give you a tan or a sunburn or anything like that, but it can help to reset your circadian rhythm so that you fall asleep on time and wake up on time. That's why it's important to use it in the early morning and not like early afternoon, or you might, honestly, if you use it too late in the day, it will give you insomnia. That's how effective it is.
Oh, okay.
So for those of us in California, it's a little bit of a trick because we're far enough north that we see sunshine all winter long, but because of the tilt of the earth, we don't get enough direct UV rays on our skin to really help produce any vitamin D in the winter. So there could be a lot of individuals in Northern California that suffer from seasonal affective disorder, or just kind of maybe what they feel is the blues, just not as much motivation, not as much energy, a little bit of brain fog, maybe a little weepy at times. And it could be just from lack of getting outside. Maybe you work in an office all day long, and when you get there, the sun is still coming up, and when you leave, the majority of the direct UV light is gone. So, you know, individuals that have that type of schedule may also benefit from having the happy box, the happy light.
Okay. Time to get a happy box. Yeah.
Yeah, get the happy box. Best 40 bucks you'll ever spend.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to make a lot of enemies with this next suggestion, because when I first heard it, I think I gave the raspberries to my computer or my phone if I was reading it. And that is, people with anxiety should really give up caffeine, and everybody should give up sugar. And it's not easy, and it's not fun. I was concerned that I had been on caffeine for so long. I thought if I quit it, maybe I'll find out I have no personality whatsoever, and I'll feel better, but I won't have any friends. And so,
well, somebody might say that they can deal with no caffeine, but no sugar. There's sugar in everything.
There is sugar in everything. That is absolutely true. And it took reading, we watched a documentary called That Sugar Show on Amazon Prime. It's a free video that's available all the time, where this guy from Australia, he documented himself doing a typical government approved low-fat diet for 3 months. And what he found by reading labels was that he was consuming about 44 teaspoons of sugar a day by eating a low-fat diet, because they took out the fat, but in order to add flavor back in, they would hide sugar everywhere throughout the products.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like eating Wheaties with yogurt and orange juice for breakfast, and you know, like maybe chow mein at lunch, and things that were really part of a standard American diet. And within the first 2 weeks, he gained 7 pounds. He started losing his energy. Close to the end of the documentary, he was pretty close to being severely depressed. He had no energy. He was grumpy, irritable, began getting kind of short-tempered with his wife. And before that, he had been really just kind of a whole food type eater, didn't have processed foods. Sugar was not part of his diet. So it was really a big, for us to watch that, it was like, oh, wow, that's unbelievable. And so the most important takeaway for me was that for every 4 grams of sugar on your label is 1 teaspoon of sugar. So 4 grams equals 1 teaspoon. So when you look at something simple as you know, a soda, a can of soda that might have 32 grams of sugar, you divide that by 4, and it's like, oh my goodness. Okay, so how many teaspoons of sugar are really allowable in the human diet before it really starts affecting our brain? Because sugar is highly inflammatory to our brains. And inflammation, for the last 20 years, research has been published that inflammation is one of the major causes of depression. And so when we see that sugar causes inflammation, then we should be highly motivated to reduce it or eliminate it from our diets altogether. So the World Health Organization recommends like less than 7 teaspoons per day for a man, and less than something like 4 per day for a woman.
Okay.
And for many people, that's their cup of coffee in the morning.
Right. I was about to go back to the cup of coffee that you mentioned earlier, the caffeine. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So caffeine is it's a wonderful medicinal tool for making us more alert and kind of jump-starting our day. But unfortunately, the reason it's hard on our bodies is because it stimulates the nervous system. And we want to, when we already are prone to anxiety, we want to do things that try and calm our nervous system. So when you're ingesting caffeine, And it's not just in pop and coffee. There's other forms that it comes in. There's, I think, a minimal amount of caffeine in chocolates, but it stimulates the adrenaline response in our bodies. And of course, the adrenaline makes your heart rate go up. It changes the way your blood flows throughout your body, because basically what it's doing is it's putting your brain in the fight or flight mode. And so you can condition your brain to have just the same way we have certain physical responses, like you see the way I'm talking with my hands. It's just kind of an unconscious thing that we all do when we talk. We can have emotional responses to situations that are formed out of habit. And sometimes those habits, most oftentimes, those habits are formed unconsciously. We don't realize we're doing it. Right. But the body can become, have a habitual response emotionally to certain things that we do, or because our body is being conditioned by what we put in it, meaning the caffeine, or the lack of sleep, or the pressure, the expectations we put on ourselves might drive up our adrenaline and our fight or flight response, because we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to perform at a certain level that may not be even realistic. So we want to start making some awareness about where are we, what are we doing in our lives on a daily basis that are counterproductive to the calming effect we want to have in our lives, and what are some things that we could substitute in exchange. Someone once told me, I thought it was brilliant advice, that sometimes when we're trying to give up something, we're so focused on giving it up that it's harder to quit it, because we're focused on giving it up. And so what she said was, instead of giving it up, first replace it with something that's healthy. And after a while, you'll crowd out the things that you don't want in your life anymore.
Can you give an easy example of replacing that which you want to get rid of with something good?
Yeah. So for example, every time I have a desire to drink a diet soda, for example, if that's something I want to give up, then I say, okay, I'll have a diet soda after I drink 8 ounces of water.
Oh.
So guess what? By the time I finish my 8 ounces of water, I'm really not interested in drinking a soda. And so that's just a really nice, easy, simple, basic concept. And if you pick, I'm going to give up 1 soda every day by drinking 8 ounces of water first, and if I still want the soda after that, then we'll see. And you may end up opening up that soda and taking 4 or 5 sips off of it, and then it ends up sitting on the desk or on the counter for the rest of the day.
Can you give a food example?
Oh yeah.
Not a liquid example?
Yeah.
Like a piece of
So
pie or something?
There's been some great books that come out. I think Consumer Reports published one last month called something along the lines of eat this, not that. Mm-hmm. And it gives healthy substitutes. I think even those need to be pretty, you need to be pretty skeptical of things, because even the standard American diet that's endorsed by the US government is still really not the healthiest for us. So let's say, for example, one of the common movements now is Meatless Monday. So someone's not ready to go full vegetarian, but they want to reduce the amount of meat in their diet. So they might try introducing their family to Meatless Monday. Okay. And they just make it all about vegetables and beans. And I mean, something as easy as beans and rice tacos on Monday night as a meatless alternative. It's easy, it's inexpensive, healthy, plenty of protein in a meal like that, and it's something you can feel good about for you and the whole family. And it doesn't feel like a huge makeover is taking place in your life, you know? And then slowly by slowly, you just start introducing more meatless nights to your diet.
Right. How about shifting a little bit towards the spiritual element and our mental health? You have a couple of ideas or practices, exercises that we can do, spiritual ones.
Yeah. I think some of the most beneficial spiritual practices in regards to mental health that I've come across is the book of Proverbs. There's so much to learn there from about managing anger, about relationships with each other as well as with God. And when I think about Jesus in the desert, you know, the desert is often metaphorical for a place of chaos and confusion. And when I think about the time that Jesus spent in the desert and was confronted by a demon, his response was by quoting scripture. And it can be a great opportunity for us to bring ourselves back to a present. So a lot of times, anxiety and depression will keep us locked in future worries or keep us locked in past regrets. And God wants us to be in the present. You know, there are things to look forward to in the future, but he really operates in the present. And having scripture memorized in advance of a situation really helps to aid in that moment. So just the way, you know, when I was in school and I had friends that played basketball, and you'd see them just standing around in the school courtyard talking to each other, but they would be making air shots and envisioning the air shot while they're carrying on conversation with somebody. And even little things like that, you know, will help an athlete to be prepared. Just rehearsing it over and over in their mind so that when it comes to game time, it just comes, the action comes naturally. And memorizing scripture is a fantastic way to help bring us back into the present moment, encourage us and reinforce what we want to achieve out of that moment, right? So, you know, one of the things that I want to transition to in regards to your question, Pedro, is that in our relationships, anxiety and depression can look very different depending on who's experiencing it. And I think stereotypically we think of anxiety being someone who is just constantly worried about things that they have no control over. And depression is typically thought of as someone who's always sad, but it can look very different. Anxiety can actually look like someone who's very controlling, very much like, you just need to do this because I'm telling you to do it, you know? And it's because they don't want to, they need that relief from the anxiety that's coming. And if you would just do as they say, then they can relax. And it's not always real fun for somebody to live in that type of environment. But if you recognize that it's coming from a place of anxiety with them, it helps you to not take it so personally. Sometimes anxiety can look like anger. Sometimes anxiety can look like feeling overwhelmed. And maybe you don't even have a conscious idea of what you're overwhelmed about. But say your child walks up to you, you're in the middle of making dinner, you've got a lot of things running through your mind that you don't know if you're going to have the time, the energy, or the clarity of mind to accomplish. And your child asks you for something simple, and you find yourself going, you know, this sort of, I'm so frustrated, I can't handle one more thing kind of response. And they don't recognize it as anxiety, so they tend to just feel like they're a bad person because they're not patient, they're not kind, they're not loving in that moment. And so they kind of miss the opportunity to do something about it, or to do some self-care, actually. Sometimes depression, like I said, it's stereotypically defined as this kind of sadness, but a lot of times depression manifests itself in very physical ways. You might not have a consistent bowel movement. You might be constipated for several days, or have diarrhea for unknown reasons. You have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or you have difficulty waking up in the morning. You have weight gain or weight loss for no explained reason. I think a lot of people experience fatigue and just having really low energy. Maybe in their mind they would like to do something, but they just don't have the motivation to do it anymore, whereas they used to be ready to jump up and put their shoes on and do something that they enjoyed. So it can look very different, and really cluing into yourself as to what's different and why you think that's different. And I hope that some of the things that we've discussed today are helpful in kind of creating a starting point of where you should explore, because it's not always about the way we think. Sometimes it is the way we are treating our bodies, and we're not getting enough sleep, or we're not, because maybe it's out of our control, or maybe it is in our control, but maybe we're not getting enough sunlight, maybe we're not getting enough of the vitamins and minerals that we need. And then we start looking at those things first. Well, this is how it goes when you're in a relationship. So I'm going to say it out loud, and then I'll have to try and modify it for when you're doing it, when you're talking only to yourself. And that is, when you do blank to me, I feel blank because of blank, right? So a lot of times people get really stuck on the, I feel irritated because I'm hungry right now.
Right.
And they don't finish the statement because, right? And so what would the because portion of the statement look like? That's where the self-awareness comes, is what's driving it. And so if I say to myself, when I'm alone, I feel depressed because, well, what is that because? Is it because I'm convinced that no one cared about me in the first place, and now my phone's not ringing and no one's checking on me, so it just confirms that no one cared about me and I'm unlovable, right? And so if that's where, and if you have to literally write that sentence down and fill in that sort of that Mad Lib, so to speak, to really concretely hear yourself say it out loud. I'm upset because I feel unlovable. Like, really? Do I know anybody that's unlovable? No. So do other people perceive me as unlovable? I can't imagine, and you start having that conversation with yourself. Like, is this an extreme form of thinking? And can I talk myself back from this to where it's more realistic about myself?
So
how do I alleviate this, right?
Kind of replacing falsehoods with truth.
Yeah.
Things that we imagine. What is the truth about this?
Right.
All right.
Right.
Okay. Very.
But that's a very good question. I do think that probably people who have worked really hard to fill their lives with a lot of activity, so they weren't confronted with these thoughts, are now forced into a situation where they have a lot of quiet time and a lot of uninterrupted time on their hands, and a lot of stuff bubbles to the surface that they weren't prepared to process yet.
Right. I was going to deal with that 5 years from now, but now all of a sudden it's here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Any last suggestions, Machelle?
Well, let me look at my notes and see. Oh, yes, there was one last thing I wanted to mention, and that is finding things to do indoors that are forms of self-care are really important right now. Belly breathing is an excellent practice to help calm your nervous system. So a lot of times people don't realize that when they are anxious or feeling stressed, they breathing from their chest, which is a very shallow form of breathing. But you want to lay on your floor, lots of things you can do when you're watching TV that are actually self-care oriented. So you can lay on the floor in front of your television set and just practice breathing through your belly button. And that really draws oxygen all the way into the lower lobes of your lungs and helps to kind of reset your adrenal gland and reduce that fight or flight response in your body. So it's a good habit to form, and it's something once you start feeling it, that belly breathing, that you can do it while you're sitting. If you're working from home, you can do it then. If you start feeling tense up in your neck and your shoulders, you remind yourself, I'm going to do 1 minute of belly breathing while you're helping your children do their schoolwork, or while you're doing the dishes, or any place, driving in your car, you can do belly breathing. You just don't want to do it so deeply that you get lightheaded. That's why it's a good good to start laying down for that reason. If you start getting lightheaded, you're already laying down anyways. So I was reading some interesting notes from Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a leading psychiatrist in the country. And he was talking about, have a dance party, do something out of the ordinary, put on music you don't typically listen to, do something that kind of throws off your routine. And it really does cause your brain to go, hey, wait a minute, this is different. What's this all about? And it helps to kind of just reset things for a little while. And, if you find yourself feeling sad and you're turning on sad music, you really have to do something counter to that to bring about the emotion that you want to feel.